In this tutorial, I'll be walking you through how I modeled this jack-o'-lantern scene in Blender. The tutorial is broken up into two parts. In part 1, I'll model the pumpkin and the stem and show you how to cut the face out with the Boolean modifier. We'll also set up the base of our scene, adding a camera, lights, and the backdrop. Part 2 will focus on creating the materials for the pumpkin and altering the scene lighting for the final render. While this guide is oriented towards beginners, it's not a complete beginner's guide, so I expect you to have a little bit of familiarity with Blender's layout and its common shortcuts. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Let's dive right into it. We'll start modeling our pumpkin by adding a UV sphere. The default settings with 32 segments and 16 rings are fine, so we don't have to mess with those. Tab over to edit mode, hit 1 on the number pad to go to front view, and select the topmost vertex. Hit O to turn on proportional editing, and make sure that it's set to smooth. Then we'll hit G to grab, Z to lock the movement to the Z axis, and drag the point down. You can use the scroll wheel to change the size of the proportional edit. Once you're done with the top vertex, we'll do the exact same thing to the bottom one. Once you're happy with this shape, we'll turn off proportional editing and push the topmost and bottommost point in just a little bit further. Then hit 2 on the number row to go to edge select and 1 on the number pad to go to front view. We're going to loop select every 4th vertical edge to add creases to our pumpkin. Hold down Alt and Shift and left click to select the entire loop. Once you have all the edges selected, hit Ctrl B to bevel and create a small bevel. Then hit S to scale, Shift Z to exclude the Z axis and scale it in. When you're happy with the shape, tap back to Object Mode, right-click, and Shade Smooth. And that's the base of the pumpkin done. I'm going to rename my collection and objects really quick to stay organized before we start on the stem. Then we'll click on the eye icon to hide our pumpkin for a second and add a cylinder. Change the number of vertices from 32 to 16. I'll rename the object, scale it in, move it up the Z-axis, and unhide the pumpkin. I'll keep moving and scaling down the cylinder till it's roughly the size I want. Then select both objects and tab over to edit mode. Deselect everything, click on any part of the cylinder, and hit Ctrl L to select all the linked parts. Only the cylinder should be selected so you can keep manipulating it, but now we have the wireframe on the pumpkin to help gauge the proportions. Alt left click the bottom of the cylinder to select that loop and scale it out to form the base of the stem. Then we'll shift left click every other vertical edge that isn't on a pumpkin crease, hit Ctrl B and create a small bevel. Hit S to scale, Shift Z to exclude the Z axis and scale it in to form the creases on the stem. Then hit 3 on the number row to go to face select, select the top face, and hit 1 on the number pad to go to front view. We'll form our stem by hitting E to extrude and dragging up, R to rotate, and S to scale down. Then you just repeat that as many times as you like. E to extrude, R to rotate, S to scale. When you're happy with how it looks, go back to Object Mode and Shade Smooth. I'm going to hop over to front view, select both objects, and move it up the Z-axis so it's above the ground plane to make things easier to work with when I add my background element later. Let's add some detail to our pumpkin with some modifiers. Head over to the Modifier tab to add a Subdivision surface modifier. Bump the viewport and render levels up to 3. This will give the pumpkin more geometry for our other modifiers to work with. We'll do the same thing with the stem, but only adding 2 levels this time. You may have to reposition the stem afterwards. With that out of the way, it's time to work on the face. We'll be using a Boolean modifier to carve out shapes in our pumpkin, and I think the easiest thing to do is to use an SVG file that has the shape you want. You can create SVG files in programs like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape if you need a free alternative, or you can download ones that other people have made. I'll include links in the description for the ones I used. You can of course model the shapes directly in Blender itself in a variety of ways, but I think it's easier to use an SVG. Hide the pumpkin temporarily and head over to File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics. Import your file, select all the shapes, and move it down the Y-axis. Next, we'll combine all these curves into one object to make it easier to work with. With everything selected, Shift left click on any of the parts to make it the active object, indicated by the yellow outline, and hit Ctrl J to join. I'll rename the curve to Face and move it to my Jack-o'-lantern collection. With the face selected, right-click and go to Set Origin, Origin to Geometry. Then hit N to bring up this flyout menu, go to Item, and set the X-axis location to 0 to center the face. Hit N again to close the menu. Hit R, X, 90 to rotate the face 90 degrees about the X-axis. Then go to Front View and move the face into position. Hit 3 on the number pad to go to Side View and move the face closer to the pumpkin. Go to the Object Data Properties tab, Geometry, and adjust the extrude so the face is punching all the way through the pumpkin's surface. When you're done extruding, right-click the face and go to Convert to Mesh. From there, we'll add a Boolean modifier to the pumpkin and select the face as the object. If you hide the face, you'll see the cutout, but you might end up with some weird artifacts. To fix this, go to Object Data Properties, Normals, and turn on Auto Smooth. If that doesn't fix everything, try adjusting the Auto Smooth number or increasing the level of the Subdivision surface modifier. If you built your own shapes in Blender for the cutout, you may have to recalculate the normals of your shape, but I'm not going to cover that here. The last modifier we'll add is a Displace modifier to give some texture to the surface of the pumpkin. Turn the strength down to 0.01 and add a new texture. Then head over to the Textures tab, choose a Clouds texture, and change the size to 0.05. These numbers just serve as a starting point. Feel free to play around with them and see how you like the results. We'll also add a Displace modifier to the stem. Turn the strength down to 0.05 and add a distorted noise texture. The amount of noise you use is going to heavily depend on how you model your stem, so use whatever you think looks good. I went for the subtle look, adding just enough so the objects won't look so flat when we light them up in our scene. Once you're happy with how your jack-o'-lantern's looking, we're going to set up our scene. Some of the effects I'll be using won't work in Eevee, so set the render engine to cycles and turn on GPU compute. If for whatever reason you can only use Eevee, you'll still be able to follow along, but you'll end up with a different look. I'll add a new collection and rename it Camera and Lights. Then I'll create a quick backdrop by adding a plane, hitting S to scale, and typing in 10 to scale it up by 10. Go to Edit Mode and select the back two vertices. Hit E to extrude, Z to lock the movement, and type in 20. Then edge select the middle edge, hit Ctrl B to bevel, and scroll up to add more segments. You don't need too many, something around 10 will do. Then go back to Object Mode and Shade Smooth. I'll move the backdrop back along the Y-axis to create some distance between the pumpkin and the wall. Add a point light, which will serve as the interior pumpkin light. Go to Front View and move it into the middle of the pumpkin. You won't be able to see the light through the pumpkin just yet because of some extra faces created by the Boolean modifier, but we'll get rid of those later. Add a sunlight and put it off to the side. This will serve as a fill light and help illuminate the stem. Hit Shift T to control where the light points. Add a spotlight and bring it up and back the Y-axis. This will be our backlight that creates some rim lighting on our pumpkin to help visually separate it from the background. Since I plan on repositioning the backlight a lot to get the look I want, I'm going to add an empty axis for it to track to, so I don't have to constantly adjust where the light points. Place the axis in the middle of the pumpkin and go to the light's object constraints and add a track to constraint. Set the empty axis as the target. Now your light will always point towards the pumpkin regardless of where you move it. If you want, you can do the same thing to the sunlight, but I found that I didn't move that one as much. Lastly, we'll set the strength of the world light to 0 because I want my scene to be dimly lit as if you were outside in the dark. Then we'll add a camera and move it into place. I like to lower the resolution to 720 pixels so I can quickly render while I work and get a better idea of what the final scene looks like. I like turning on the composition guides in the camera's object data properties under viewport display to help me line up my shot. Once everything's in place, hit F12 to do a quick test render and you'll notice the face mesh still renders despite not being in the viewport. That's because we have to hide it from the render output as well by clicking the camera icon next to the eye. If you don't see the camera icon, go to the filters and check the Disable and Renders button to enable it. That's looking pretty good, and we'll wrap it up there for part 1. In part 2, we'll finish up the scene by creating the materials for our jack-o'-lantern and adjusting the lighting setup for the final render. For easy access, I'll leave a link to part 2 in the description. If you have questions about anything, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them.